My name is Andrew Chrisman. I'm one of the reporters with Senior Housing News. A few housekeeping items before we get started with today's webinar. Feel free to type and submit questions as you have them, and we'll get to as many as we can during the webinar. A recording of the presentation and the slides will be made available after the conclusion of today's webinar, so please look out for an email with a link to the slides and instructions for accessing those materials. Thank you, Conversion Logics, for sponsoring this webinar. So today we're going to be sharing practical strategies for optimizing your senior living website for lead generation. In this webinar, we'll cover the secret sauce behind top performing senior living websites, a checklist of senior living website must-have features and information, real-life examples of lead generation success stories, the importance of website analytics and understanding user behavior and marketing performance. So we have a few wonderful guests joining us for this webinar. We have Jen Lovely. Jen is a senior living marketing executive who pioneered Conversion Logic's senior living practice over 13 years ago. She's a trusted advisor to her clients, delivering qualified website traffic that accelerates leads, tours, and move-ins. Before joining the company, she spent 20 years in the hospitality sector as an executive in sales and marketing. Daniel Hickey founded Hickey Marketing Group in his 20s. After working with large household brands, he realized that small to mid-sized businesses were not taking advantage of the strategies and systems that make large companies more successful in their marketing efforts. He founded Hickey Marketing Group with a mission to make the strategies of larger companies accessible to smaller businesses and organizations. Allison Sangler has over 25 years in senior living and is a seasoned sales and marketing leader with a proven track record of driving occupancy and revenue growth. Her extensive experience spans industry leaders, owner-operated communities, and third-party management for both new developments and established portfolios. A data-driven professional, Allison meticulously tracks and analyzes performance to ensure consistent growth in occupancy and revenue. Jen, I believe you had a few things that you'd like to say.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. First of all, I just want to say I'm really excited to be spending some time with these amazing people today. Allison and I this is our third stint in working together. She is my client and myself as her digital provider, but have become close friends as well. And we've worked together for 8 years. And then Daniel and I have also become very good friends and talk to each other on a regular basis. And we've been working with clients together now for 12 years. So thank you so much to the two of you for joining us and joining me today. And I'm excited for a lively conversation today. Also, for all the participants, in the bottom center of your screen, you're going to see that you can download a checklist. So take advantage of this asset before the end of the webinar.
Okay, with that, let's go ahead and get started with a little bit of conversation. So Jen, this first question is going to start with you. So how has senior living prospect behavior evolved in recent years, and what implication does this have for the way that we design and develop websites?
Andrew, a lot of people are really expecting to find what they want immediately. They don't want to wait for information. They want to be able to find it online. So I think it's really important to make things readily available and easy to find. Also, something that's important too, and I know Allison and Daniel will talk a little bit about this as well. You've got different family members, different seniors themselves at different stages of the journey as they're looking for a place. And I think it's really important for all of us to remember that not everybody's ready to schedule a tour today. So we need to have different conversion points, whether that's downloading a newsletter and getting newsletters on a regular basis, or maybe I'm going to RCP for an event, just come in and check it out. Maybe I need to download a brochure. So we need to make sure we've got everything covered as far as reaching them at all these different stages of their journey. So, and I think Allison has a few pieces she'd like to add to that as well.
Yeah, I think just along what you said, I think when you are putting your website together now, and just the customer that I'm working with is that active adult. So we scale a little bit younger. And so they're looking for themselves, and they have, they always express they want some immediate gratification. And kind of to go along with what you were saying, Jen, they're starting their search a lot longer because it's a want-based move. So they start doing a lot more research. So in order for them to get what they need, they want to go to the website, be able to get the data, and then come to you with questions. So, we've even started doing most people now, I think a lot of us are putting prices on our website now with our sitemap through Ingrain so that they can, let's be transparent about what it costs so we can drive the right leads to your community and not have your salespeople wasting time with people who aren't able to move in due to price. And then also, another thing that has been interesting is I've kind of made this jump from more that care level community to more active is that, what in our mind is retirement? What do we think retirement is right now? What is that actual age? And, us trying to skew a little younger in the 70s, trying to get that 72 to 75 age, those youngsters, they want to see themselves in your website. They want to see that younger active resident. They don't look in the mirror and I think see the people we're putting on the websites right now. So that's also been interesting when we visit with them. It's like, are we putting on our pictures or using the residents that really depict what your community is trying to drive to your website?
And Allison and I have had this conversation a lot as well, but we need to become a trusted advisor to these folks. So especially with Allison being an active adult, these people may need to sell their houses. So it's nice for her to say, hey, if they need a referral to a real estate agent or, do you have any sort of assets I can download or how to downsize my home or whatever that may be. We need to think of all those different ways that we can be helpful to them as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think this is where we're really going to be able to get kind of into the meat and potatoes. I feel like this is what people really want to know is, talking about the secrets of top performing senior living websites. What key elements do you think a senior living website should have in order to be effective?
One of the things that I know is very important is you've got to solve a pain point. So, for example, when Allison and I were just talking about active adult, I'll give this one example. Maybe I'm looking at downsizing and moving into an active adult community. And maybe one of my main sticking points or one of my main pain points, maybe I'm tired of cooking 3 meals a day, tired of cleaning my house. I'm tired of doing yard work. So we need to make sure that whatever, population we're addressing or whatever levels of care we're addressing, we're solving those pain points. So if I'm interested in downsizing, the website needs to say, hey, and I'm being really goofy here, but saying something like, are you tired of doing yard work? Are you tired of doing the dishes? Come here and you don't have to do this anymore. So we really need to be solving people's pain points, and they need to be able to see that pretty quickly on a website. That's really important.
Yeah, I would jump in, Jen, with you and kind of agree, especially in this active adult, active living, they are wanting to make a move for a lifestyle. So they want to see something on your website that tells them a story where they can see themselves living there, because they're not looking to move because they're in a stressful situation. They're really wanting to change their lifestyle. So we've had to, when we look at our website, it's like, how do we paint that picture for them, especially when we're in pre-lease and we're not open? It's like we don't have a lot of examples of our residents doing things in our community right now. So we've had to be creative on that, and even listing a lot more of what's in our surrounding area and the benefit of living in this community because of what you get for the surrounding area as far as culture and just the overall experience, because they're not doing communities as much activities in the community as much as we bring people together to go out and do things. So it's just been extremely a different process for us on our website to make sure we tell the right story.
And no matter what you're offering, what type of lifestyle or what levels of care, I think it's really important to address how you differ from someone else. They're looking at so many options, and pretty soon everything looks cookie cutter and looks the same. So if somehow, whether it's a video right when you hop onto the website or some verbiage saying, this is what we're known for, this is how we differ. And I think Daniel's going to talk a little bit more about that as well. So Daniel, I'll hand it off to you.
Absolutely. So there are 2 real things that we notice make a big difference right off the bat. As Jen kind of mentioned, as you were going through and you were shopping for anything over a long period of time, things tend to blur together a little bit. You notice that there's a lot of common best practices that every senior living community uses, and that's a great thing because it instructs people on how to utilize those websites. However, having too many of those and not enough differentiators is really difficult. So one of the things that we've looked at, and I want to give away one tip, right now, early on, before we get into some of the more personal stuff, is really paying attention and focusing on being memorable. And one of the things that we do is we go to the executive directors, and like the example they have up on the screen right now, we went to the executive director and said, what is it about your community that helps you convert on a tour? And one of the things they brought up is, hey, you know, we are in a historic area where we couldn't make as many changes as to the outside of the building as we wanted to, but the inside is beautiful. It's been changed. We want people to come in for a tour. Number two is the sincere interaction between the individuals that work at our community and the community themselves. And then the food, you know, so we actually showed them preparing the food, showing that this is, you know, like a 5-star restaurant that they get to dine at 3 meals a day. And then showing those sincere interactions where, you know, mom can actually go get her hair done. Mom and dad can actually go to dinner and then finish things off with a movie date, because a lot of the times there is a certain amount of guilt that comes with shopping for senior living. You know, there's that question like, oh my gosh, are we putting mom and dad in a home type of a thing? There's a lot of stigma around it because of misunderstandings of what it actually is. So many parents haven't gone on a, you know, dinner and movie date in decades, but when they go to a great assisted living community, they might be able to do that every single week. So having a great video that articulates those principles early on is key. And that there's really 2 reasons behind that. Number one is because when we meet with an executive director and ask them, what are the top 5 things that help to convert a tour into a move-in? They know right off the top of their head. They don't even have to blink. They know exactly what those things are. But then when we click around their website, we might have to go through 4 or 5 pages to get those messages, if they even have all of them available. So having those right there available in the first 45 seconds is huge. The other thing is when it comes to web rankings, when people stay on your website for a full minute on the homepage because they're watching a video, and they go to a competitor's website and they might only spend 20 seconds there, that's a big indicator to Google that your website has something that is more attractive and more interesting than the other, and Google automatically wants to put you up top. So that's one thing we'd highly recommend. For anyone with access to video that can put that as an autoplay on their website, that's completely, you know, huge and key. So yeah, that's one of our big recommendations. And then we'll get to call to action stuff in a little bit as well. But yeah, that's one of the first things that people can do to make a huge impact in both SEO and conversion. And it's rare that you see those 2 things merge. So yeah, we absolutely love homepage video.
And it's really important as well to make sure that people or prospects are able to get in touch with you right away as well. If they see something they like, make sure that you've got all sorts of tools. So whether it's live chat, make sure you've got a phone number visible. Some people like to pick up the phone and call. And then make sure that as they scroll around from page to page, make sure that these things or these tools actually move with them. It's frustrating when, for example, I'm even live chatting on a website and then I go to a different page and then it goes away and I'm trying to find my live chat conversation. So it's really important, to make sure that they've got these tools to get a hold of you right away, and a variety of tools, and then making sure too that these tools migrate onto every page as they move around, or they're located on every page.
Yeah, that's huge. And I want to touch on one more thing regarding consistency across pages. We've been able to develop over 200 senior living websites in the past 10 years, which has really shown us what conversion actually is associated with. So a lot of the times we look at a website and we're like, wow, why is this one converting so much better, so much faster, and learn it so much quicker? And one of the key things is something Jen touched base on, which is making sure that the call to actions are consistent across every page. And web developers tend to hate this. Even our lead developers, they love making each page their own unique opportunity to show how great design can be, which it's great for aesthetics. And clients look at that website and they love the look of it. But then they're like, oh, I don't understand. This website looks amazing and it's not converting as well as we expected. And when you look at it, it's really because they fail to have a global footer and global sidebar. And that means that the sidebar has the same call to actions on every page. And if you think about this, it makes total sense when you think about how most of the world has been trained to utilize e-commerce and converting websites. And Amazon taught the world how to do it. And for all of us, if we were to close our eyes for just a half a second and picture any product on the world on Amazon, we know where the add to cart button is. We know where the buy it now button is. We know where the add to wish list button is. We can picture it because they don't change it for every single page. And then you go to senior living websites and it's like, oh, wow, they had this really cool free needs assessment tool. And then, yes, they had a schedule a tour button. And then they had their third call to action, which might be a free white paper case study or, how to downsize type of a thing. And they can't find it. And we've all been there, especially like Black Friday. All of these different companies love putting 30% off plus free shipping. We get excited, we're ready to convert, and then we can't find that discount code or that coupon code. And now we can't get over the hump of having to pay that $30 extra in our mind that's extra now that that offer's gone, and not having the free shipping. It's the same thing when someone finds a conversion tool on your website they love. So making sure that if you have your top 3 call to actions, and number 1 is schedule a tour, number 2 is a free needs assessment, number 3 is just getting them into the pipeline via our email newsletter, make sure that those are the same on every single page, because that just makes sure that when they're on the floor plans page, they might have been ready to convert from assisted living on that page, but now all of a sudden it's in the same place. Because like we talked about, everyone knows how to use Amazon, and because of that, they expect to see those buttons in that right-hand corner on every page. So we highly recommend that as well.
Thanks, Daniel. Something else that we want to talk a little bit about too is that we want to make sure that your website is SEO friendly. So enable your brand to rise to the top of search results. That's going to be real key importance here. So Daniel, if you can touch on that just a little bit more too, that'd be terrific.
Definitely. So SEO is one of those terms that we have to use because people know it. But I hate even calling it that because it kind of harkens back to a day when people were trying to trick Google for money. And at the end of the day, Google is so darn smart, and we want our brands to be honest. We want everything that we do to be above board and good for the people that we are serving, which is usually the people researching senior living. And when it comes down to that, it really comes down to content. And what Google wants when it comes to an SEO-friendly website, really, you have to think about it from Google's standpoint for a second. And all they want is when people type in assisted living near me, or senior living, or what's the difference between assisted living and memory care, or what is a continuum of care? A lot of the times people are typing in questions into their search bar. People have changed their relationship with search dramatically, especially since kind of voice to text has popped in, and people can say, I can't say the names right now because all of our phones will go off, but we all know those names that you can't say because your phone is listening and it's going to answer a question that you ask. So when you ask a question, Google is trying to provide the best answer to that question. And it's not just saying, hey, well, I don't understand why we're not ranking for assisted living plus our geographic location. What page would Google put people on? So one of the main things is making sure that you have one page per service you provide. So if you offer assisted living, if you offer memory care, independent living, and all of these different services, you really should have one page for each of those, because just like we talked about with Amazon, we can go as niche as we want. If we wanted to say green Nike running shoes in size 9, and we Googled that right now, Google's going to find the best page that has only Nike running shoes, and they're going to put you on that. So for websites that don't have one page per query, they're missing out on potential conversions. The other thing is making sure that your website loads fast. Google is also trying to make sure that whoever makes a search and then they put them on a website, Google's been saying for a long time, they don't want to be a search engine, they want to be a referral engine. And it's not just figuring out who's the best meta tags, keywords, descriptions, but what's a great user experience. So making sure that your website loads fast. Number 2 is another thing for liability purposes. It's key, but it's also an SEO factor now. Making sure that your website is ADA compliant. So many people don't know about ADA compliance until they get hit with a lawsuit, especially in senior living, considering the senior population that we serve. Google estimates that about 7% have some type of visual impairment that they need to be able to change the font size, the color contrast, or something like that. So having ADA compliance tools is a key as well. And then the third
Thanks
piece
for bringing that up,
content.
Daniel. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. We've run into a lot of scenarios where our clients weren't aware of that, and they did get slapped with a fine. So thank you again for bringing that up.
Of course, no, that's huge. And the first part, or the final part, really is content. Google does not want to rank a website where you say, okay, here's our 10-page website. You put it up and you leave it alone. What Google really is trying to do is establish thought leadership and knowledge leadership in the different search query realms that people are searching. So they're really trying to figure out who is the memory care expert in this particular area. And what do they have to say? So just having a memory care page saying, look, we provide memory care isn't enough for Google to rank you high and keep you there. So one of the main things is writing articles for families and for the people who are actually doing the searching that adds value. It's not just saying, here's why we're the best memory care community in our geographic location. It's saying, here's 3 tips for having a conversation with family about moving into a memory care community. Or, one of the best articles that we always see is a variation, especially right around December, because a lot of people go home for the holidays. They are having a conversation with their parents or their grandparents, and all of a sudden they're like, wow, that story that dad tells every year, he forgot the name of his best friend that he's told that same story about for decades. What's the difference between memory care or memory loss with aging, just regular memory care loss or memory loss, versus Alzheimer's and dementia? So writing an article that actually says, hey, you know what? We all start forgetting things with age. Totally normal. However, spatial issues where if you see, mom put her handbag in the freezer, okay, that's a completely different thing, and it's a different conversation that should be had. So a lot of the times it's answering questions that people have as they're asking them. And one of the real things we find is has a huge benefit to it is talking to whoever answers the phones. So if you have someone up front and you just grab coffee with them once a month and say, hey, what questions have you had when you pick up the phone that have surprised you over the past month? And a lot of the times when you go into the back end of Google and you look at the keyword rankings for those questions, those become common questions where you're like, wow, so many people are asking this question about Alzheimer's, about dementia, about assisted living, and it might be driven by a particular news story or something like that. But that gets dumped into what Google calls their temporal algorithm, which is really news-based answers to questions. And you can rank through the roof and outrank your competitors by really paying attention to what's going on in particular as industries and writing about those and answering those questions. So really when it comes down to it, it's providing a great website that people want to visit, providing tools and content that people actually want to consume, and then making sure it's accessible for everybody. So that's really kind of the 3 steps to an SEO-friendly website that we recommend for everybody.
Okay, well, one, thank you for all the amazing tips so far, but I would like to go ahead and just start talking about kind of like some of the success stories that you've seen. So could you share an example of a senior living website that has been successful at generating leads?
Absolutely. I'll talk about one scenario here. I'll start out, Daniel. Daniel and I worked together on recently in the last year on a website with a company, Alta Vista Senior Living, and we've worked with tons of clients together. We provided the digital advertising. They needed a lift, and Daniel actually refreshed the website, and literally the community reached 100% census with a wait list within a few months. So that was really exciting. And obviously we had several conversion tools, and meeting people at every step of their journey was key. And then there was one thing, and I'll let Daniel show off a little bit, but that was key on the front page of the website that was really important too. So Daniel, if you want to kind of walk through that.
Yeah, so I know we've kind of touched base on the video a little bit, but one of the really big things was really focusing on where things are actually headed with consumer behavior. And like I mentioned early on, video has been really, really key and huge. So if we want to bring that back up, that would be really kind of neat. And one of the things that we did, kind of to reiterate, is we didn't just shoot a video that was non-intentional. It was really key that we talked to the executive director that was responsible for tours. So we really asked them, okay, give us a tour and pretend that we're not your marketing firm. We are an interested party. So at the end of it, we went through and they're like, okay, starting at the beginning of the building, one of the things we want to show off is all the awards that we've won. We want to show all these things off. And that was a cool shot right there. We walked by and there was a piano player and all the residents are singing, and we're like, hey, you know Sweet Caroline? And he's like, yeah, of course. Why? Because we know the residents wouldn't be able to resist singing along with it. So we had them hit that. And just seeing the residents having a good time and alleviating that guilt. This was really a big part of the secret sauce, was that autoplay video that articulated the top 5 things the executive director would want to get through to anybody who would tour. But doing that on the website in 45 seconds, because I'm sure everyone on this call has experienced that same disconnect, where you look at it and you say, we convert at 80% plus when someone comes in for a tour, but on our website, we're converting at 10%. What's the disconnect? So a video is a great way to give that tour right in that opening 45 seconds to articulate that same message that you would on a tour. But one of the really big things that we're kind of seeing is, and thank you so much for showing that. One of the really big things that we're seeing, though, is the rise of AI. So a lot of the times, the more personal that we can get, and I truly believe that, if there are ways to utilize AI tools, by all means, go for it. But people are still making a person-based decision at the end of the day when they're looking at assisted living, memory care, independent living. This is a personal thing. This is where they're going to live. So the more personal we can make things, the better. And video is a great way to do that. Live chat, it's one of the things we absolutely love about ConversionLogix and their tools, is it's not this kind of AI-based chat. It really is a human being on the other end of that. So the more personal we can make the website experience, the higher the conversion that we've actually seen. So yeah, those are two things that we would highly recommend, is having personal touches. Because as AI gets better and people don't know if they're talking to a real person, the more we can make that personal connection, the more of a differentiator that's going to become.
And it was just amazing because people could come to that front page of the website. They were staying on that page for a really long time because they were watching the entire video. They were chatting live and engaging right away. They were generally completing one of the apps, one of the conversion tools, and taking a next step. So, and the client, we loved that she was so open to using a variety of tools because she knew that different people were at different stages of the game. So that was extremely helpful. And then on the flip side, Allison and I started strategizing together and talking about, okay, we're not talking about levels of care here. We're talking about active adults. So we started strategizing and marketing and working on creating a strategy for 55 Resort Scottsdale and how should this be different and what should this look like? And Allison, I'll let you dive in and talk about a few things that we did in order to make this successful.
Great. And thank you for, you and Megan were awesome as far as it went through a couple of evolutions of, our first, I'd say 60 to 90 days of having you guys on the site and working through us to see like what keywords people were using, how do we change on the website to bring people in, because in normal active adult, it's not an all-inclusive price. They still have additional bills, but we're a little bit different. So we wanted to have that, customer facing. And then also having all the tools that, ConversionLogix does bring for your customer, whether it's the virtual assistant, so they can get to things on the website faster via floor plans, the events that we're having. Pricing is huge in this market with this demographic, and also understanding some of the psychographics that goes into what they are interested in to make sure that, they're able to get to that on our website. And I think mainly it was just adjusting our search words a lot and getting away from senior as much, because they're not searching for senior living when they think they want an age restricted apartment and a different lifestyle. And so, we kind of, through the evolution of getting the data, we've been able to fine tune it quite a bit. And even recently, you guys have added some different tools to the site for them to click through for RSVPing to our events, enhancing the virtual assistant a little bit more. And I think even the live chat for us has been probably the most important. I mean, like last night, I guess some poor lady couldn't sleep and she went on at 3:20 and was able to do a chat, and we got a lead sent to us, immediately. So it does give you the opportunity to give someone an immediate gratification when they are, they can't sleep in the middle of the night and they're searching for their next lifestyle. There was someone there to have the chat. And then we were able to call them back, this morning to follow up with them and schedule them to come in. So if we did not have that on our site, they might not have had the gratification or the data they needed, and they'll go on to the next website. So it's really important to have those tools.
And something that we've realized too with active adult is that, as Allison mentioned earlier, this is a process. This can take a lot longer. And so
it's a lot
having the different tools to actually gather email addresses, and then we're building our list, right? Building our email list. And then we're able to nurture these prospects on a regular basis. And I don't care how good someone is. I don't care if they work 24 hours a day. It's really tough to actually continue nurturing people and at the right time and at the right place and everything. So what happens is we're reaching them at some point in time, we're gathering those email addresses, and then we're able to stay in touch with them. And then hopefully they'll convert faster because they're
Mhm.
getting excited and gathering more information that they otherwise wouldn't have had. So those are some of the things that we've been doing
Well,
to
and they gain
pivot.
confidence, Jen.
That's
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, they really gain confidence too in their decision because they were able to get the data they needed. Because people want immediate gratification, and if they get frustrated on your website and they can't get the information they want, they're going to leave your website and go find another one that has the data that they were looking for, or the image that they think they see themselves in, or exactly what they had envisioned that next step in their life will be. So it's really important that they're able to get that. So it's a teaser for them to actually get in front of the customer. You can get in front of the customer to take it to the next level and nurture it, like you said.
Exactly.
Okay. So let's talk about some general advice for implementing website upgrades. And Allison, I'd like to start with you on this one. How do you decide what website design and lead generation software vendors to work with? What recommendations would you give to marketers deciding on a vendor?
Well, I think in this whole industry, it's relationship based, right? So you really want to, we're all on here. Like if you looked at, how long I've known Jen and how long Daniel does, you build your trusted resources. But I think it's really important to have the vendor that gives you the support that you're going to need and who's going to be sitting almost shoulder to shoulder with you to be able to make the changes and have the conversations. And, that's one reason I go back to Conversion Logics a lot, is because I know that I've got Jen as a resource. Megan, I've had at all of the companies I've worked for. They know that I'm not going to really work with anyone else besides Megan, because she understands what's important to me, and we can make a switch quickly. And they look at the data the way that I look at the data. I really feel like they're my partner. So I think that's important to really have the trust in the vendor, so that when you're spending those dollars, you know that you're getting your money's worth.
Okay, Allison, I'm going to go ahead and stick with you for the next question that I have. When creating a website, what role should the marketing team play compared to the website provider to create an on-brand experience?
Well, I've always been very hands-on when it comes to doing the website. I always feel like, you know what your brand's going to be, your brand standard. And I think it's working shoulder to shoulder too with your creator to make sure that the image that your company or your owners are wanting to put out to brand your property and to make sure that it carries through. So you have to be very involved. And I always feel like you can give information and then they bring it to you, and then you work together to create and edit and get to a point where it has ease of use. It's telling the picture and the story that you want it to tell. And then you start getting results, and we've had to make quite a few adjustments after it hit the market based on some feedback of people that we had learned, and now I feel like it's working very well for us.
Okay.
And I want to
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, well, I wanted to toss this next question your direction to start with. And, we know that it can be challenging to get all the key stakeholders to agree on website design and content pages. How do you manage the approval process when redesigning a website?
Something to think about is that you don't want to overthink the approval process, right? Trust your vendor. Don't overthink it. Make sure that, like I said, you're addressing prospects' pain points. You've got what you need there. Just keep it as simple as possible and as little decision makers as possible. If you get 8 people in the room trying to make this decision, it's going to get messy. So again, don't overthink it, and just know that you can trust your vendors and go with their guidance.
And Allison, I'd like to also go ahead and toss that question in your direction as well.
Yeah, I think for me, I want to determine early on who's going to be part of the approval process. And, when we were creating our company page, it was just basically our principals. It was me working with the website developer, and then our principals would go through and do an evaluation. When you're doing a site for ownership, it was similar. Everyone's going to have an opinion. So you want to establish very early on who's the final. And it has been the same. Just the ownership, one person at the ownership group who has that experience, who can guide you as to make sure that we're carrying on what their vision was. But that's why they've typically hired us. They trust us to take their vision and manage their properties. So I would say the smaller the list, the better.
And something else that's
100%.
important. Yeah, something else that's important as well is that just having that close relationship. For example, with Daniel being the website provider, myself being the digital vendor, having that constant communication, because we may have a vision in the very beginning and move forward with a website, but then as Allison mentioned, as we've gone along, we might say, this is really interesting. Here's some of the keywords that are really getting traction. And I can go to Daniel and say, can you add this into the content on the website? And let's optimize things here. So it's always going to be a learning process. And if you completed a project and completed a website and you never changed anything, that would be really simple. It's always going to have moving parts, and it's always going to be a process. So don't feel like it has to be perfect and exact when you sign off on it, because there are going to be changes as you go along.
Well, and one of the things that I think is really a neat nuance. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, please go ahead. I was just going to remind people that if they have questions for our panelists, to make sure that you ask those in the Q&A. And when we get to the Q&A section, we'll be sure to get those to them.
Absolutely. So, no, one of the things I really love about that question, Andrew, is it kind of goes back to goals. So one of the things that is very subjective is design, but what's not subjective is the math. So when we are going through a web build process, and kind of when we started this company, we got really, really lucky to be able to sit with a lot of very large household name companies when do website builds with them. And when we were working with them, we noticed that the conversation wasn't around design. It wasn't around any of that. It was all math based. So when we would get a whiteboard out and we'd look at, okay, so we want to sell the brand new Maglite as a new flashlight. We need to sell more of these than this. There's brand awareness, there's all of these different. Storytelling was about 3 steps down the road. Design was about 3 steps down the road, and it started with the math, where we were able to look at it and say, okay, when we do this particular thing with the image slider, and we have these buttons and these call to actions, we know from previous historical data that this action is taken. So it takes 1,000 visitors to convert to 112 sales. We want to make this many sales. So here's what we do on the homepage slider. And everyone in the room wasn't having to agree on design, because that's a very heavy lift. Everyone has their own, subjective views of design. But when everyone in the room says, hey, we want to sell 10,000 flashlights a month, that's our goal. So for assisted living and memory care communities to say we're at 83% occupancy, we want to reach 100%, and the next goal is to build that wait list. When you look at it that way, and we are looking at historical data, and we are treating different elements of the website like math, and we say, well, if we are already 100% with assisted living, but we need help with memory care, we're changing that homepage header to be specific to memory care. And that's what we want that imagery to be. Then here are the 2 call to actions we know that work. And here's the customer journey. So I think a lot of the times it's difficult to get people to agree on design. But when you really start with the census, and then what is our goal, and what are the moves we can make on the website build to reach those goals, a lot of the approval process gets simplified because everyone has the same goal. So I really think going more goal-oriented versus design-oriented really helps keep projects on track.
Okay, Daniel, thank you. That was absolutely brilliant. And that's, I mean, yeah, what's the end goal? Have the end in mind, right? You've got to have that in mind and know what you're all working towards. And on that note, Andrew, I'm just going to kind of jump in here, but in addition to having the end in mind and knowing what your goal is that you're trying to reach, if you don't know what your goal is, then you're just kind of floundering out there. And I want to mention something, and this will give away my age, but this we're not putting ads in Sunset Magazine anymore or in Alaska Airlines in flight, and then someone says, "How did that work?" And we say, "Gosh, I feel like I'm getting more phone calls." You can't feel like something's working. You've got to know what's working, how it's working. And these days, it's great having attribution software. You've got to work with a partner who has goals set up in your Google Analytics. You've got to have attribution software. You've got to have conversion tools, because now at the end of the month, when you're looking at monthly reports, you don't want to say, wow, last month wasn't very good. What can we do to make it different? Because you can never have yesterday back. You can't have last month back. With all these new great tools and being able to see what's working and what's not working, we can literally pivot on a dime. Allison and I were in a situation probably 7 years ago where we had a call to action and kind of wondering if it was going to work or not. It was a 3,000 reasons, right? And we were like, okay, what does this really mean? Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? But being able to look at attribution, and in our minds, we thought, gosh, is this going to make people anxious, wondering about 3,000 reasons why I should move in, right? But should we just spell it out and say what it is? Save 3,000. What's going to work better? So being able to look at attribution and seeing, okay, we're not having any conversions when we say it this way, but guess what? We can change it tomorrow and say it this way. And now we're seeing immediately that we're getting conversions and we're getting traction. Now let's leave it. That's fantastic. So we were able to pivot and make changes to immediately affect the month for the month that we were in versus losing out and doing it later down the road. So those are some really important things. Again, being able to make sure you've got conversions set up in your Google Analytics, making sure you've got conversion tools like in our Conversion Cloud, and attribution software. You've got to know what's happening. You've got to know what strategies are working. Do we need to put a little more money here, delete a little money here, so that you get the best bang for your buck in the day that you're in?
All right, and as a reminder, if you haven't downloaded the checklist, this might be a good time for you to do so. But I believe that at this time, I think we should be able to start moving on into our Q&A section. So just as a reminder, if you do have questions for our panelists, you can feel free to ask those and we'll get to as many as we can. If you are watching on demand, we will follow up and be able to get those questions to you as well.
And Allison, thank you for participating. I know Allison had a flight change, so she's got to head out the door. But thanks again, Allison. It was great to see you, and I'll see you again soon.
All right. Thank you. And it was a lot of fun, and I hope everybody learns everything that they needed to learn. So thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Okay,
so now you've got Daniel and I here to answer any amazing questions you've got.
Okay, so let's just go ahead and start with one of the first questions that we have is, how do you measure the ROI of website optimization efforts for senior living communities?
Do you want to
I love that one.
Daniel?
So yeah, so one of the things that this really comes down to is collecting and storing previous data. So many times, as Jen mentioned, people are going off feeling, where they're like, I feel like we have more tours, I feel like we're busier, but they're not actually looking at the previous data. So really a lot of this starts months before we ever launch a new client website. So really the moment that a client asks for a proposal, part of that proposal is we are running analytics, not just on their website and ranking data on their website, but their top 3 competitors. Because really when you look at it, Google's homepage is like beachfront real estate. There's not any more of it. It literally is, you have that first homepage above the fold, you've got the 5 above, and then you've got really 10 spots on the homepage of Google. So when you're really trying to figure out what the ROI looks like, what you want to figure out is really 3 things. How does the funnel work? And then where were we before? So if you had a website and you ranked number 9 for assisted living plus your geographic location, and then all of a sudden you look at after you launch and you're number 3, well, it's really easy to look at the numbers. It's like if you rank number 1, you're going to get about 32% of the traffic. Number 2, you're getting about 20%. Number 3, 12. Anything after that, you're starting to get single digits. When you see that move and you can calculate, okay, well, how many site visitors does it take for a tour? And how many tours does it take for a move-in? It becomes really easy to look at that. But one of the real key elements there is making sure that you have that data, that your CRM system is connected with your website, with your analytics and all those things. And that really is one of the things that we love about ConversionLogix is the tools that they have are just amazing. So when you look at the data, they have an entire dashboard. So we're not waiting till the end of the month for the reporting from the SEM company to figure out what's working. You can make decisions on a dime and figure out what's happening. So, figuring out that ROI is absolutely huge, but it really starts before the website launch so that you have that baseline data.
Andrew,
Jen-
I
oh,
see
go
a
ahead.
question here. I see a question here that I'd love to answer. Someone asked, "Can you have too many conversion tools on your site?" I I love this one. Here's the thing. Here's my reply: the more the merrier, right? Start out with as many as possible, and then if you see that no one is engaging in a certain tool, then remove it. I think we always want to assume ahead of time that people are or are not going to engage with certain tools. And a lot of times our assumptions are incorrect. So go ahead and give them as many opportunities as possible. And the nice thing is that, for example, with our Conversion Cloud tools, if you have several options, you can toss that into a wallet style. You don't have to have several buttons across the entire bottom of your website. So there's different formats that you can use to make different conversion tools and different numbers of conversion tools look attractive. So, and different sizes. But I would say go ahead and run with more. And if you see that something's not getting traction, then go ahead and remove it from there. But you never know until you try. So
Right.
let's go ahead and fail first if we need to, right? So that's my motto. Daniel, do you have anything to add?
100%. So when it comes to call to actions, really it's all about testing. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to see 10 call to actions on a website knowing that 2 are our top performers. So to Jen's point, you want to test all of them because different markets react differently to specific call to actions and different wording. And it's amazing when we see, like kind of going back to that design and the approval process thing. A lot of the times you'll see people really trying to figure out and spend hours figuring out what type of billboard that they should put up on the side of a road. Big companies don't do that. They will actually say, okay, for every 1,000 visitors, we're going to swap the picture out. Then once we know what picture converts, we're going to change the text. Then once we know what text converts, we're going to change the button until we know what basic billboard is going to that's going to actually convert and work. And with call to actions and conversion tools on your website, it's the same thing. So try it different ways. You might have a free needs assessment that you call it for 1,000 visitors, then switch that call to action over to download our free white paper and case study and figure out which one of those performs. And then once you know, then really narrow it down to maybe the top 2 or 3 based on performance. But all of that is great data. So yeah, I absolutely love that.
Another question that we had that came in is, how do storytelling, videos, and content marketing impact lead generation on senior living websites? Jen, if you wouldn't mind starting with that one, that'd be great.
Yeah, honestly, having those storytelling videos just only increases leads. It's amazing. So as Daniel mentioned before, focus on those things that actually convert people during your tours and have a great video, and then that helps people to get excited, and then they want to start engaging, whether that's with live chat, whether that's scheduling a tour, whether that's saying, hey, I just saw this, it looks fantastic, I want to attend an event now. So it only helps and it increases lead volume, in my opinion.
100%. Yeah, video really, the job of a website is to increase tours. It's very rare that a sale is 100% made on a website. It really is about increasing the amount of tours. And if you can show someone that it's worth their time to come in for a tour because the food looks amazing, the staff looks great, the amenities look, wonderful, that's a really big key. And the other thing is realizing that part of the job of a senior living website is providing tools for the eldest children to actually show their parents to make it less scary to come visit. So when they see great food, a movie theater, other people that look like they might be potential friends, you're giving them a tool to help convert. And another question I saw pop up, similar to that, was all about, that storytelling and pricing, and one of the things that we do see is some communities do absolutely recommend putting pricing out. But what we've noticed is that depends on what the other communities around them are actually doing as well, and where their price point falls. So it really isn't a yes or no. When we have someone say, should I put pricing on? We can't answer that question unless we look at all of the other websites around them and figure out where they fall as far as price point and all of those. Because a lot of the times people fail to identify additional added values by a community that might look more expensive until you actually tour and you realize, oh, When you look at the valet service and you look at all these other different things that go into that, it's actually less expensive community than someone else, but it depends on where you fall in that value proposition. So being able to tell that story via video and then determine, let's put our pricing on for 1,000 visitors and see, do we get more or less tours? It's really a case-by-case thing because a lot of that depends on what your competitors are doing as well.
And then in addition to that, regarding the question regarding Alta Vista, that was just a scenario. The comp set was not listing prices, so Daniel opted not to. But on the live chat portion, if someone asked about it, we were 100% open and talked to them through that. So that's not something that they were going to hide or not talk about. So we did address it if people had questions, and several people would address it on the live chat, and we'd answer it. So I think, again, just look at what's happening in your neck of the woods with your comp set in general on your website. If you see a lot of people asking about it, like, for example, if we saw people asking about pricing every single day on live chat versus once every 3 weeks, we might go to the client and say, hey, people are asking about this every day. You may want to add it. So that's how we go about it.
Okay. Daniel, we had a question come in that is specifically directed to you here. And it's kind of regarding the importance of, what do you have to keep in mind when you're choosing a development framework for website design? An example that was provided was that WordPress has some unreachable technical assets that most of the time are hard to adjust for reaching a good speed and loading time, which apparently happens often.
That's a funny question. Yeah, so that's really good. So there are a few different things to look at there. So when it comes to framework, you want to find something. So WordPress is an interesting one because it powers over 40% of the internet. So most small to mid-sized websites are built on WordPress. You have other platforms like Drupal, Joomla, and then kind of the self-serve, Wix, Squarespace, and things like that. One of the things that we highly recommend looking at is conversion and the different tools that you have there. So when you have conversion tools, what's the likelihood that they integrate with that? So if you look at WordPress, you have Salesforce, you have HubSpot, you have every single CRM system that integrates with that because they'd be shooting themselves in the foot to not integrate with such a dominant platform. When it comes to load time and load speed, what we've actually noticed is WordPress is not usually the problem. What the problem usually is the theme selected or the plugins being used. So the more plugins that you add to a WordPress install, the slower that's going to run because it actually has to add each one of those plugins and load those before the functionality is 100% and ready to go. So for instance, let's say that a senior living community website is built on WordPress and the developer doesn't ask the right questions up front and say, okay, do you need a community location tool? Does it need to be able to find the closest locations and integrate with Google via an API to find the closest location based on zip code? Are you going to have integrations? All those different questions really dictate the platform as well as the theme that's used. And if you ask those questions up front, usually WordPress is fine because you don't have to add a bunch of plugins to remedy questions that weren't asked on the front end. So if you have a WordPress install with one plugin or 0 plugins, that's usually going to be lightning fast. And then it comes down to the images and the way that you actually build the website. But WordPress is a very dominant platform as long as you don't clutter it up with plugins and functionality that was added after the fact. But yeah, when it comes down to what you're going to use, it really is determined by the different vendors that you're going to work with. So some integrate with Drupal and Joomla better. Others say, hey, we have a direct plugin for WordPress where it's going to take you 5 minutes to do an integration versus 3 days. So it really comes down to asking the right questions early on to find a platform that is going to grow with you and make sense.
Okay, and we are down to just a few minutes left. So remember, people, if you have those questions, please go ahead and get those in. And if we need to follow up and get those to our panelists following this, we can do that as well if you're watching this on demand. Just want to give it maybe another minute or so, just in case we have anything else roll in.
Also, Andrew, I saw one of the gals who's joining the webinar. She's in the UK and had to put her daughter to bed. So she asked, will I be getting a link so that I can watch the end of this later? And absolutely, you'll receive a link and you'll be able to watch it on demand. afterwards. So if you missed a portion of it or you'd like to forward it to someone else to watch, you will be able to do that. Andrew, anything else you'd like to add regarding that?
Yes, there will be an email that is sent out following. Once we're done, it should be out. I believe we looked at trying to get it around an hour or so following the end of the webinar, and you are able to watch this on demand. You can find that at the Senior Housing News website. But I think other than that, I believe that is going to go ahead and conclude our webinar today. Daniel, Jen, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. And a huge thank you to ConversionLogix for sponsoring this webinar.
Andrew, one last thing I'd like to add. If anybody would like to get in touch with us, will we be sending out our email and phone? They'd like to call us, correct?
I believe so. We did actually just have one more question come through.
Okay.
And I feel like this is probably gonna be a little bit more of a Daniel related question. But Jen, if you'd like to go ahead and weigh in on this as well, you could. What website platform would you recommend best for conversions or that you have seen perform the best?
So really the most common that we see is WordPress. And the reason for that is because everyone has integrations and tools for it. And like I said, it's a very stable platform. It's great. It early on got a really bad reputation just because it is open source. And because of that, a lot of things were still being figured out and people would not update it, in a timely manner. And just like an iPhone, iPhone is great. It's stable. Android is great. It's stable. But if you don't upload those latest security patches, it becomes vulnerable. So it got a bad reputation, but I would say that, WordPress is the most common that we do see. But it is just because of those integrations. Almost everyone has a quick integration with it. Whereas if you do a custom coded website, you literally have to go back to that web developer and say, hey, how much will it cost to create this API call back and forth to make this work? And it becomes really cumbersome versus a lot of the CRM systems, a lot of the conversion tools, they just have an immediate code snippet that goes directly into WordPress. So, it really depends on what your overall goals are. But as long as you follow the right steps with a WordPress install and you pick a good theme and you aren't bloating it with plugins, it really is about the most versatile out there. And the other thing we like to recommend when it comes to WordPress is the fact that everybody knows how to utilize it. And we have seen clients that have come to us and say, hey, we're not happy with our current vendor. We want to make a switch, but they built it in this very exotic scripting language or this particular platform that nobody works with. So they really are tied to that developer because no one else knows how to work with it. Every agency on the planet knows how to work with WordPress because it is so dominant. So for those reasons, it really is, it's hard to overlook that platform.
And you can always keep in mind too, that you can always add TCC or any other conversion tools to help generate conversions, no matter what you're using. So that's really important to remember. One last thing I wanted to ask, Daniel, I actually just had someone text me and they were talking about, I've got a website where I can make my own changes or the website provider can make those. Do you have an opinion on that?
I do. So I love, and that's another reason WordPress isn't bad, is because people can log into the backend and make their own changes. Now, the danger of that comes where people are like, all I want to do is I want to change the image of our assisted living director because we just hired on a new one. And they just grab that photo and they upload it, not realizing that they just broke their ADA compliance with that because they just uploaded an image that was called Canon Camera 483 by 681, which tells Google and visually impaired users that was taken on a Canon camera and here's the dimensions, versus actually saying, Jen Smith, our new executive, director at, and then the assisted living community, where it gives someone who's visually impaired the ability to look at that. So I believe that people should have, number one, they should own their own website. That's another one we see too, where a lot of platforms, you never really own your website. You pay all this money to onboard, but you don't own it. With WordPress, you own that website, whether you switch providers or not. I do think that you should have a login so that you can make changes, but it is important that your provider cares enough to give you the proper training to make sure that when you're uploading things, you are not doing something that's negative for your SEO. Once again, that Canon Camera 486 by 381 that's not an SEO title that's going to do you any favors, and it's not ADA compliant. So as long as you have the right training, having access to your own website is great. So owning and having access to your website are both key things that I think everyone should look for.
And I want to emphasize, own your website. Daniel and I have been in some situations with clients where they've been trying to move over, and it's a real challenge. So definitely make sure you own your own website.
Yep.
Okay, that is going to take us to the top of the hour. Again, Daniel, Jen, and I know that Allison had to leave, but thank you all so much for taking the time to speak with us today. Thank you, everybody in the audience that tuned in. Thank you for submitting the wonderful questions that we got. And thank you to Conversion Logics for sponsoring this webinar. It's really appreciated.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, team.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.